I want to make something epic. I know. I'm gonna create the best darn Windmill Terrain. Hi folks, my name is Leif and I want to welcome you to my YouTube channel called DEVSANDDICE, where I paint miniatures or craft awesome terrain for the tabletop. In today's video, I'm going to create a windmill that not only looks great, but also features a fully playable interior and an exterior which offers some new tactical opportunities. Let me walk you through the plan. My windmill will feature a wider bottom floor, which leads up to a slanted roof which models can walk on. From here, players can use a ladder to get up to the overlooking balcony on the top floor. Another way of getting up through the building are miniature-friendly stairwells. And finally, players can climb up on the roof, grab a hold of the blades of a windmill, which rotate 45 degrees clockwise each turn to make a daring attempt to jump onto the balcony. But before we start this endeavor, I want to ask you a small favor. If you like the content I make, then please consider subscribing. It's a small click for you, but it means a lot for the future of this channel. With that out of the way, let's start working on the world's bestest windmill wargaming terrain ever. So, I'm gonna start this project quite humble, with a base in the measurements of 5 × 5 inches. I cut that out on my laser cutter, and the same for the walls, which were cut in thick cardstock. The cardstock I'm gonna use as a base for me to glue bricks on. And in order to make them have nice hinges, as I call it, I simply use some masking tape and tape the two pieces together, creating a nice hinge that I can cover my base with. Pretty good. The next step was really to glue this in, and I prefer to use hot glue, especially when I have a wooden base, because it doesn't warp anything, and I will be covering this up with different material. Like for instance this wooden floor, which is defined by some leftover coffee stir sticks. Looks quite nice, I think. Once the excess has been cut off, I glue in the two remaining little ruined wall sections there to create my base floor. For the corners, I chose to use some balsa wood in the 5mm persuasion, which I cut to shape and glue in to the corner. Whenever I'm gonna use some bricks, I try to make sure that my bottom layer is glued on with hot glue. That enables me to quickly continue with any sort of white glue for the rest of the layers while knowing that it won't fall down. Now, of course, on the inside, I didn't have that problem because there was, well, flooring. Now, in general, I want to talk a little bit about this project. In all honesty, I originally wanted this project to be a tapered cylindrical shape, but that was way too difficult and it caused a lot of problems for me from a gameplay point of view. So I decided to make this a square windmill. Now, that being said, the thing I liked about the cylindrical tapered off one was that it was wide at the bottom and smaller the higher up you came. So I wanted to maintain that sort of illusion, which is why I went with 5 × 5 inches for my base. Now, as you can see, I have used some pseudo carpenter tricks with some half joints to make a nice solid base for, I guess you would call it, the second floor. In this vein, I also wanted to start thinking about the stairwell. This is something that I cut out on my laser cutter, and then the actual stairs I glue in using some coffee stir sticks. And the whole point of those is to, I guess, pinch the actual base of a model so that the model can actually stop midway anywhere in the stairwell, which worked quite nice.
These plans that you see me cutting out on some foam core will be available as per usual. Check the description down below. I'm gonna have to admit and say this was quite tricky because my coffee stir sticks are only about 14 centimeters long, I think, so I had to actually join them up in the middle too, because I knew I wanted to create the base for a roof here that shot out from the 5x5 inches that we have as a base footprint. So it was a little bit tricky, but I think I figured it out quite nicely, to be honest. All while I had to have that stairwell glued in because I needed to make sure that, of course, models can, get the heck up from there. Here is a first mistake that I did. So for the walls that I cut out using foam core, I used the same technique of using tape to create those hinges. All good, I've done it before. I laser cut some windows, which I used similar techniques as I did with my Townhouse 2.0. Glued those in using some hot glue. All is going well, and here I even have some larger supports in the corners just to ensure that the corners are 90 degrees. But the problem was to get everything to be exactly where I wanted it to be. So here I brought out the scalpel and cut some of the walls off because honestly they were just pieces that was in the way, and in the end I decided to more or less cut the tape away and join the 4 walls individually so that I had more control over their specific placement. Once I had done that, it was a simple matter of gluing in those 5mm square dowels that I use for timber. And here I thought I wanted to create a slightly slanting roof, right? I need models to be able to walk on this roof. So I created a shape which was just leaning a couple of degrees, but good enough so that models could, without problems, navigate the actual roof. Some support beams for the rest of the floors were glued in. Step by step or floor by floor, I glue in an additional stairwell. And here you can see me measuring the different stairwells and making sure that they fit. I didn't have a clear layout how to do this, to be honest. So the stairwells sort of ended up instinctively where they ended up.
Oh, okay. So here I need to interject a little bit. I'm not sure why it happened, but I got a little bit confused.
Well, what can I say? This wasn't a straight project in any means. There you can see that I'm cutting out a doorway to the balcony, right? Which I knew I wanted to have, and I make a balcony using some coffee stir sticks and some dowels, and then I discover, wait. My plan was right, but wrong. I glued it 1 floor below. So I had to tear everything asunder, and I guess here is a good thing that I use the technique I use with underlying structures, and then be it texture paste or be it bricks, it doesn't really matter. And I'm gonna be honest, I wasn't exactly sure that all of this Frankensteining the wall back together would work. But in the end, I think it did, and I honestly, when I look at the finished product, I can't really tell that something horrible went wrong here. So I think this method of building terrain does have its advantages for sure. Here you can see that I am starting to define the actual top floor, and here I also wanted to have a little bit of an overhang for the A-frame, which I think makes it look a little bit more medieval-esque or fantasy-esque, whatever you want to call it. Two A-frames were created, and then I decided that I needed a third. I'm gonna get back to the reason why in a while, but first I wanted to also glue in that balcony and create some supports for it. Here I'm starting to define the actual A-frames, and there is a good reason why I created multiple ones. It had to do with stability and the fact that the actual, I guess, exit to the balcony needs to be a part of the A-frame, right? Because there's a slanting roof on the top floor. So this was a new one for me, but I honestly thought it went better than I expected, and it seems a little bit rickety and not very stable, but those support beams that I just glue in there at the bottom really helps to solidify everything. I knew, of course, that in the end, once I've glued all of the coffee stir sticks and all of the shingles and so on in there, it's gonna be quite stable. Now here comes the star of the show. This is a bamboo skewer that I essentially drove through all of the walls there, and that's going to be the basis for our actual windmill mechanics. In order to make this more sturdy, I just added some, I guess you would call it, shields of some sort that were made from wood, so that from a friction point it would be wood versus wood, and it would become much more sturdy. Here I'm actually making a pilot version of all of the poles for the blades of a windmill. This worked out pretty brilliantly because then I could quite quickly use a drilling machine and make sure that each and every side got the exact holes and dimensions where I wanted it to be. As you did see there, I did actually run out of 5mm dowels, so I had to buy some, and they were unfortunately a little bit shorter than I would have wanted. So I had to actually remove 2 of the panes from the actual blades. This is a little bit of a 3D designed and printed thing that goes in the middle of the windmill blades. So the idea here was that, one, it would be a nice decorative piece, but also guarantee that the windmill blades would be in an angle of 90 degrees from each other. As per usual, I use my trusty sand texture paste to create a little bit of texture on the stucco, and I glued in a railing for the balcony using some super glue and activator. And then it was time to put some shingles on the roofs. Not often I get to say roofs, but remember we have a roof downstairs that is 2 inches up, and then the roof at the top of the windmill. Here, I think in all honesty, I forgot to place a window in here, so I had one more cut out, and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna make this boarded up because it's not very interesting to be at the very bottom floor. Now when it comes to painting, you know the procedure. I tend to prime using Vallejo black primer through the airbrush, and then I zenithal prime it with some white ink. And then afterwards I come in with some brown ink to make sure that everything looks properly dirty. Some dark gray goes over the bricks. And here I'm doing an experiment with some blue colors for the paneling. Unfortunately, I didn't really like that, so I actually reverted back to a dark green from the army painter, which I then highlighted with a lighter green. The inside was painted using my trusty colors, which are light brown and flesh tone beige. To contrast the paint of the panels, I chose an orange color for the shingles. So I have a very specific gameplay purpose. I want the wind blades to work only in one direction and be locked at every 45 degrees. And in order to realize this, I had to create a ratchet function. Now with the construction of this, I had an inkling that this would sound like Wheel of Fortune or something similar. So what do you think? I have to say, it was a pretty satisfying sound to hear. Light gray is my color of choice when it comes to dry brushing everything. It makes everything pop while making it look a little bit worn down and old. Leadbelcher was used on all of the window frames and the actual 3D printed detail in the middle of the windmill's blades. Corrosion texture from AK is my favorite to get a little bit of that grimy feel and texture on a lot of the metallic things. It also worked to put that on the bamboo skewer. The trick is here though, keep everything moving so that no corrosion texture dries in a place where it stops the mechanism from working. Some wall filler was diluted and used to fill in the spaces between the bricks, which I always feel gives it that more realistic look. And as per usual, I add some posters, various ones. I don't know if you see it, but that one in the front there is actually my friend Donnie from Dice Chatter. Once the corrosion texture has dried, which happens quite quickly, I use some riser rust here and there to start defining some of the rust. Strong tone and military shaders are my go-to tools to make sure everything looks grimy and dirty. Let's not forget that ladder leading up to the balcony. And then, as usual, I do some graffiti. And while I do some graffiti, I want to take this opportunity to thank my patrons for their support. And a special shout out goes to my champion and legend level patrons. So thank you so much Agresomnia, Andreas Winberg, Arjen Angenent, Bo Ahlgren, Fredrik Kierskard Lund, Gunnar Byström, Henrik Mannerstråle, Jamie Everston, Jason Chastain, Lawrence Davis, Madners, Magnus Solberg, Teddy, What I Got to Roll, Anton Hand, Battle Corgi V7, Niklas Swedenlind, Oliver Granlund, and the Elder Kind. Thank you so much, good folks. And now, it's time to see the final result. I'm so happy with the end result of this windmill. Not only does it look proper Mordheim in my humble opinion, but it also features interesting gameplay mechanics, something that combines the two worlds I love the most. What do you think about the end result? Please tell me in the comments below. I hope you like this video, and if you do and want to see more of my videos, then YouTube recommends that you should be watching this. Stay safe, and I will see you in the next video.